I never thought a single moment could shake me to my core. My body was drenched, my legs felt like jelly, and the ground beneath me seemed to vanish. I could barely breathe, let alone stand. What happened that left me in this state? Stay with me till the end, because this story will haunt you. I never expected the night to turn into something I'd never forget. It was supposed to be ordinary, just like every other evening. The streets were quiet, the air was crisp, and the distant hum of the city buzzed faintly in the background. I had walked this path 100 times before, but something about that night felt different. I tightened my jacket around me as a cold wind brushed against my skin. The streetlights above flickered, casting long shadows across the empty sidewalk. The silence wasn't comforting. It felt thick, almost suffocating, like the air was pressing against my chest. Then I heard it. A soft sound. Faint footsteps, barely audible, but enough to send a shiver down my spine. I turned my head quickly, expecting to see someone walking behind me. Maybe another late-night walker, just like me. But there was no one. The street stretched out, empty and still. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Shaking off the unease creeping into my chest, I picked up my pace. But the moment I did, the sound came again. Closer. A lump formed in my throat. My pulse quickened. Every hair on my body stood on edge. I turned around again, slower this time. My breath caught in my throat. The streetlight at the far end of the road flickered, and for a split second I thought I saw something, a shadow standing still, watching. But in the next blink, it was gone. I swallowed hard, my hands clammy. Maybe I was tired. Maybe it was nothing. I forced a chuckle under my breath, trying to convince myself that I was just overthinking. But my body wasn't convinced. My skin felt cold. My stomach churned, and a deep, unsettling feeling weighed down on me. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was suffocating. I took a deep breath and kept walking, telling myself to ignore it. But the further I went, the heavier my steps felt, like something unseen was pressing against me, making it harder to move forward. Then, out of nowhere, a sound broke the silence, a sharp, unnatural whisper. I froze. My blood ran cold. The whisper was so close, like someone was standing right behind me. But when I turned around, there was nothing. Just empty space and the dim glow of flickering streetlights. My legs felt weak, my chest tightened. I didn't want to stay there any longer. I forced myself to move, pushing forward with everything I had. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And then, just as I reached the last street before my home, the air around me shifted. A cold, damp sensation wrapped around my ankle. I barely had time to react before I was yanked off my feet. The second I felt that icy grip on my ankle, my entire body locked up in fear. It wasn't just cold, it was unnatural, like something lifeless had latched onto me. My breath caught in my throat as I looked down, and my heart nearly stopped. A hand. Pale, thin, almost skeletal, with long fingers that wrapped around my leg like a vice. It didn't belong to anything, or anyone. I could see. Panic exploded inside me. I let out a strangled scream and kicked frantically, trying to break free. My hands scraped against the pavement as I tried to crawl backward, but the grip only tightened. It was pulling me, dragging me. My vision blurred, my lungs burned, and my mind raced with terror. I couldn't think, couldn't process what was happening, only that I had to get away. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the hand let go. I scrambled backward, gasping for air, my body trembling uncontrollably. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I stared at my ankle, expecting to see marks, bruises, something to prove that I wasn't losing my mind. But there was nothing. The street was empty. The night was still. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. I swallowed hard, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had I imagined it? Was it some kind of hallucination? My entire body was shaking, my clothes damp with sweat, my limbs weak and unsteady. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't hold me. They trembled violently beneath me, and I collapsed back onto the cold pavement. That's when I felt it. A presence. I wasn't alone. Slowly my eyes lifted toward the streetlight ahead, and that's when I saw it. A shadow. Tall, unmoving, standing just at the edge of the flickering light. My breath hitched. My entire body turned to ice. The shadow wasn't like a normal one. It wasn't cast by anything. It just stood there, dark and solid, despite the way the streetlight flickered above it. I wanted to look away. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. Then it stepped forward. My heart slammed against my ribs. My fingers dug into the ground as I tried to push myself away. But it kept moving, slow, deliberate, like it had all the time in the world. The light flickered again, and for a split second I saw something beneath the shadow. A face, pale, hollow, with sunken, empty eyes that locked onto mine. A wave of nausea rolled through me. My vision swam, my body felt heavy, like something was crushing me into the ground. Then the whisper came again, software close, right against my ear. "You shouldn't have looked," and the world went black. Darkness swallowed me. I wasn't sure if I had blacked out or if something had pulled me into a place where light didn't exist. My body felt weightless, yet heavy at the same time, like I was floating but being held down by invisible hands. I could still hear my heartbeat, rapid, unsteady, desperate. Then, just as suddenly as the darkness came, it was gone. I gasped, my eyes snapping open. I was still on the street, lying on the cold pavement. The air was thick, suffocating, pressing against my skin like a damp cloth. My body ached, my legs were trembling, and I could barely move. But I wasn't alone. The shadow stood just a few feet away, closer than before. I wanted to scream, to run, but my limbs refused to cooperate. I could only stare as the figure loomed over me, its shape shifting slightly as if it wasn't fully solid. The streetlight above flickered again, casting brief glimpses of its horrifying form. Its face, if I could even call it that, was twisted. Hollow eyes sunk deep into a pale, lifeless expression. Its mouth was slightly open, but no breath came from it. It didn't blink, it didn't move, it only watched. I tried to look away, but something held my gaze in place. It was like my body no longer belonged to me. Then it took another step. I heard the sound, slow, deliberate, like something dragging itself forward. My pulse skyrocketed. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to move, to fight, to do something. And then it reached for me, its arms stretched unnaturally like its bones were bending in ways they shouldn't. Its fingers, long, bony and claw-like, extended toward my face. The moment they came within inches of my skin, I felt it, a cold so intense it burned. I gasped, my body recoiling as if I had been doused in ice water. The pain shot through my limbs, shocking me back into control. Without thinking, I forced my body to move, pushing myself backward with whatever strength I had left. The figure stopped. For the first time, it tilted its head, as if curious, testing me, seeing how much I could take before I broke. And then it whispered, "You let me in." The words slithered through the air, seeping into my bones, wrapping around my mind like a curse. I felt something shift inside me, something deep and unexplainable. A weight settled in my chest, something dark, something wrong. Terror clawed at my throat. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew one thing for certain. I had to get away. With every ounce of strength left in me, I scrambled to my feet and ran, my legs buckled with every step, my vision blurred from the overwhelming fear. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop, because I knew if I slowed down, if I looked back even once, it would take me. I didn't stop running. My breath was ragged, my chest burned, and my legs felt like they would give out at any moment, but I pushed forward. The world around me was a blur of streetlights and shadows, but none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was getting away. I could still feel it. That presence. It wasn't chasing me in the way something living would. No footsteps pounded behind me, no rustling of clothes, no sound at all. But I knew it was there, watching, waiting. My house came into view. Relief should have flooded me, but it didn't. A voice in my head screamed that I wasn't safe, that whatever this thing was, it wasn't done with me. I stumbled onto my front porch, fumbling with my keys. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip them. The air behind me felt heavier, colder. My skin prickled with an unbearable sense of being watched. Finally, the key slid into the lock. I twisted it, shoved the door open, and slammed it shut behind me. Silence. I pressed my back against the door, my breaths uneven, my body drenched in sweat. My mind raced, trying to process what had happened. Did I imagine it? Could fear have twisted my mind so badly that I saw things that weren't real? But then, something shattered that illusion. A whisper. Not outside. Inside. My stomach dropped. My eyes darted around my dimly lit living room. Everything looked normal. The couch, the bookshelf, the small mess of clothes on the floor. But it didn't feel normal. I wasn't alone. The air was too still. The quiet was too heavy. Then the closet door creaked open. My body locked up. My breath caught in my throat. The door was only a few inches open, but the darkness inside was deep, unnatural, as if it didn't belong to this world. A shape moved inside. Number Not moved, crawled. Something slithered out of the darkness, its limbs contorting in sickening ways. Its pale, twisted fingers gripped the door frame, its hollow eyes locking onto mine. A grin spread across its face, too wide, too unnatural, as if its skin was being stretched by something unseen. Terror gripped me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. The thing pulled itself closer, inch by inch, and then it spoke. "You brought me home." My vision swam. The room spun. A deep, overwhelming pressure filled my head, like something was sinking into my mind. I felt my body weaken, my knees buckled. The world faded to black, and as the darkness swallowed me whole, I realized something horrifying. I wasn't dreaming. I was his. I woke up on the floor. My body felt like it had been drained of all strength, my limbs cold and unresponsive. My head pounded as if something had been clawing at my mind all night. For a moment I didn't move. I didn't want to, because if I did, I might confirm the one thing I feared the most, that I wasn't alone. Slowly I forced my eyes open. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, casting soft golden rays across the room. My living room looked exactly as it always had. The couch, the bookshelf, my coat hanging by the door. Normal, too normal. I pushed myself upright, my legs still trembling. My skin felt damp, my clothes clinging to me as if I had been sweating all night. My mouth was dry, my throat raw, like I had been screaming in my sleep. Was it real? I wanted to believe it wasn't, that my mind had played a cruel trick on me, that fear had twisted reality into something my brain couldn't comprehend. But then, my eyes landed on the closet door. It was wide open, and on the wooden surface there was a handprint, a single, pale handprint. I stumbled backward, my breath hitching. My entire body screamed for me to get out of the house, to run and never look back. But something stopped me. A whisper. "See you soon." My stomach twisted. The whisper wasn't in the room, it was inside my head. Panic surged through me. I grabbed my car keys and bolted out of the house, barely remembering to shut the door behind me. The cold air outside stung my face, but I didn't care. I needed to be anywhere but there. I drove aimlessly for hours, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My thoughts were a storm, a tangled mess of fear and confusion. Was I losing my mind, or had something truly followed me home? I didn't return to the house that night. I checked into a motel, leaving all the lights on, staring at the door for hours, waiting for something, anything to happen. But the room stayed silent. Still, I felt it. Even now, as I tell you this, I can feel it, watching, waiting, because once it sees you, once it chooses you, it never truly leaves. So if you ever feel something watching from the darkness, if you ever hear whispers in the silence, don't look, and whatever you do, never bring it home. Watch till the end, because what happened next will leave you questioning everything